Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome to Shelf Stories, a channel that tells tales from games, books, and life. And welcome to the One Stop Co-op Shop podcast. I am your host, Jason. Thank you so much for stopping by for this latest chat with a good friend of mine. It is very rare that I get to chat with people from Connecticut. Yes, my home here, my adopted home, I should say, here in Connecticut. So I was able to make a con. I rarely make cons. I have small children. It is pandemic land. I haven't been to many cons at all, but I was able to go to FalCon, which is a local convention here in Connecticut. And this man has been a veteran of FalCon. We'll get into how many years you've been going through con and FalCon, that whole thing. But I had met this man over there and I gamed with him. I think he just collapsed. If you're watching the video, I think he fell over.
I think my mount for the webcam was not sturdy enough. Let's work on that. So I sort of rigged. I Rube Goldberg something. How's that? Is that a little better? That's
you're a little bit out of focus. Just get your head in the middle of the camera over there. And I'm keeping this, by the way, for the podcast listeners.
Thank you.
Keeping it. I don't care. This will tempt you to go ahead and tune into the video show if you're not doing so already. But if you are not watching the video, you'll know on the video, Eric is in his dungeon with spikes that are headed towards his skull as we speak. But we will have excellent audio here for you. If you want to listen to the podcast, that's perfectly fine. So Eric Summerer is my guest. Welcome to the show.
Jason, thank you so much for inviting me. And so the key is that you need to start bringing the kids to the convention, which is something that I did a few years back. Started bringing my eldest and then both of my boys to the ConCon and FalCon conglomerate of conventions, and we've had a great time. I've sort of indoctrinated them into the process of teaching games and playing games in this event, and it's been quite the father-son weekend for me, and it's really been a blast to continue it year after year.
You'll probably know Eric Summerer's dulcet tones from the Dice Tower, from all those introductions. He did the introduction to my podcast for many, many years. I really appreciate it for that. If people don't know, I probably shouldn't assume, Eric Summerer is one of the primary voices for the Dice Tower. He is a geek. He is a gamer. He is a retired curler, according to his bio.
Yes.
What does that... So, okay, retired curler. So curler is a ridiculous sport. That's like a Canadian thing. It's truly ridiculous. But what do you say? What do you mean retired curler? Were you paid professionally to curl?
I was not. No, but I haven't been on the ice in some time. And that's the key. When my son was born, there were only, and I think there still are only 2 curling clubs in the state of Connecticut.
2?
And when I was curling, it was about an hour drive for me to get to. In fact, there was only one when I started curling. There was only one curling club in Connecticut, and it just having an infant and driving an hour back and forth to a late night curling session was just a little much for me. I couldn't do it anymore. So I backed away, and the most recent thing I did is I took my kids to like an open house and got back on the ice for the first time in like a decade. And I didn't fall on my butt. I think that is the most important thing.
Curling, if you don't know what curling is, Google it, please. It is, do you want to break it down for the people? I know that's not to do with board games, but curling is just, it's like a train wreck. I can't turn away.
Well, no, that's not fair. Actually, curling is one of the more board gamey sports that are out there. It is very strategic in the way you position your shots and deal with the situation on the ice. It is a game played on ice, a sport played on ice, in which the players have to move a 42-pound granite stone across the ice. They deliver this stone and it slides down the ice, and you're aiming for a target, a circular target at the other end that's called the house. And you're trying to get as close to the center of the house as possible. That's called the button. And you have team members that actually reduce the friction in front of the stone using brooms. They sort of melt the pebble on the ice. The ice is an uneven surface, and they melt it slightly to cause the rock to go straighter and farther. And then the stone will sort of rotates and it will curve its way around things. That's part of the curling aspect of curling. And you're trying to get more of your stones closer to the center than your opponents. and that's how you score multiple points in a round or an end of the game. And it's got a lot of strategy in where you position these things, and I had a blast doing it. Really, really enjoyed the sport. I would love to get back into it, and it's still a lot of fun to watch.
So are you going to be unretired curler in the near future?
You never know.
You
You
never
never
know.
know. I would never say never. The
Never say
kids
never.
actually sort of said, I would love to do this if you decided to do it. But I also am fully immersed in other sports for the kids, including ninja and parkour. And
Oh,
at the
nice.
moment, that I have to focus on those.
Parkour is another one.
Yes, we pick all the strange sports.
That's it. I am totally kidding. I'm not gonna. I don't want to get no flame for calling anything ridiculous. Dude, whatever floats your boat. It looks like fun. Being on the ice. I mean, I'm a hockey person, so like, I mean, being
Sure.
like on the ice is a very actually really cool experience. So
Yes, yes.
any excuse to get on there.
You bet.
All right. So we are here to talk about FalCon, which is a local convention here in Connecticut for those of us who are not able to go to Essen. So all of us
Yes.
in the board gaming universe have friends who are content creators, or in the, like, all the posts went up and all the board games were shown and all the famous designers and publishers and all the fun was being had. And we are in Waterbury, Connecticut.
Yes, it's true. And I mean, it is important. There's all aspects of this hobby. And one of the aspects was all the brand new hotness in Germany, all the latest releases, the giant spectacles, all of that stuff. But sometimes the lifeblood of the hobby is just people getting together and sharing the games they love. And for this particular convention, this has always been not as much of a play new stuff event for me. This is almost always a share some of my current favorites,
Right.
or even longtime favorites, and share that love of the hobby with other people who come to this. I tend to run multiple events at ConCon and FalCon, and so I taught 4 different games over the course of the weekend. My son is now teaching games over the course of the weekend, and so I don't think I think I maybe played 1 or 2 games that were new to me. And everything else was stuff that I already knew, but playing it with new people, which is also really, really fun.
Yeah, no, so this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this, because I think that as we get, hopefully come out of the pandemic for good this time, we may have lost the thread on, conventions and getting together and, being there. Vaccinations were required and, everybody was masked up and there was a lot of kind of safety protocols that were observed. And I think, it wasn't like jam packed. So we're able to, if you wanted to kind of keep your distance and go outside and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot that was done to be able to attend a con like this safely. And I think it's just so valuable. And I was just telling you before the call, like, I mean, I've been to PAX. That's the only other one I've been to. And that's not a gaming con for me. Like, it's a meeting people con. And it's again, seeing what's hot and seeing who's doing what. And I think last PAX, I played like 3 halves of games. Like either because of demo or because I'm here and I'm like kind of zonked out. I felt really bad. Like my friend Will, the Hungry Gamer, was like doing a game of Substraddle or something, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna learn this, gonna play this, and then like maybe like 10 minutes into like the teaching portion, I'm like, I can't do this. My brain is completely fried. So it was nice to go to FalCon and it's just games. And it's not like, the buzz of like all the stuff. It is games that kind of, I would think of it like, games that kind of rise to the top, like, cream rises. These are games that are like 6 months in, or maybe they're a couple of years in, and it's like, okay, people are still excited to play a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the new releases, get some attention, but they can't be too new because we've sort of been planning for the past couple months to make it happen. Right. So the brand new stuff, unless someone brought their new copy of Flamecraft or something, that I saw a couple of copies of that floating around, and I had Comic Hunters in my bag, but that wasn't. It was more stuff that's been out long enough that. Right. People could say, "Oh, this was the event. We are going to schedule a game of such and such and play it there." So again, not brand new Cult of the New. It was the evergreen titles, and there's also ones that this is the only chance you get to play a large scale game of something, or old favorites that manage to hit the table every ConCon or FalCon. And some of my favorites were those.
You can guarantee Scythe, you can guarantee TI4,
Yeah.
Even if it's not, and so they have a sign up system. So if you've never been to like these kind of local cons, and I'm not sure every con does this, but I would totally recommend it. So there's slots, right? So like you have your 3 slots on Friday, start at 9, start at 8 a.m., start at 12 p.m., start at 7. And so you sign up ahead of time. And so you're guaranteed something. You don't have that awkwardness of like, okay, I'm going to show up and am I going to get a table? Am I going to do that? Like you can do that. You can go to a free player and, kind of find something, but it's nice to be able to go and know that you have certain things just like I'm here and I'm going to do this. There's no like, messing with anything. And that's due to, people who volunteer like yourself who offer such slots. So I highly recommend that experience. How long have you been going? Like, because I remember I went to ConCon 6 years ago, and not for RPGs, for role-playing games. And whose dulcet tones did I hear at the
Well, I mean, it's gotta be it's certainly longer than I've had kids. So
Wow.
it's gotta be 15, 16 years.
Oh my God.
I've been going for a long time, and I started just going for a day. But this is currently a 3-day convention, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They expanded into Friday morning this particular year. Usually it starts midday on
Nuts.
Friday.
Were people there?
I heard that a few people were there for the slot. I was not able to go until the kids got out of school that
Right,
Friday.
yeah. Mhm.
So as soon as they got out, we hopped in the car and headed out. We arrived around dinner time on Friday, enough time to eat dinner and get settled, and then run the evening slot on Friday evening.
Mhm.
But I heard that a few people did show up. Some people come in Thursday night and get together and play some games in the hotel lobby, that sort of thing. It's
Mhm.
still a pretty low-key event as far as being packed with stuff, but it's a very enthusiastic group.
So we're going to talk about the games we played. I asked Eric to rank the top 4 games. Maybe it's the top 4 games that you taught or anything like that. I don't know if he just thought of it right away. It's like, okay, let me go think of 4 games.
Yes.
So, but before we get that, I have one last thing to mention about FalCon, which is the experience of selling games. So I see this post a lot on Facebook and on Twitter. How do I move my old games on and everything? So actually, we've had a couple of upset this. There was a little bit of a time where BGG you weren't allowed to sell your games at BGG. Now I think they've relaunched the market, but for a while people were a little bit worried about. Board Game Co. used to take your old games, but he kind of shut that down. So Facebook, people have a mixed relationship with Facebook. Not everybody's on Facebook in terms of like trading and selling games. So if you want to try to move on your games, a local convention is a pretty good place.
It's certainly my favorite way to do it. The no ship auction that centers around a convention. This is usually handled via a geek list on Board Game Geek, and people will put up their games. Here's the game, here's its condition, here's a starting bid, and then people post comments on that geek list item to bid for the item. And people seem to have different focuses for what they put up in these auctions. Some people are trying to get as close to the original sell price or the purchase price as possible, or the current market rate. I tend to be trying to clear stuff out as much as possible. So, and in the position that I'm in as a reviewer, when I've reviewed something and talked about it in whatever form I'm going to talk about it, and I've decided not to keep it in my collection, I don't feel right charging a lot for these games. And so almost everything, in fact, everything that I received as a review copy goes up for $1, regardless of what its market rate is. And then sometimes people will bid it up, but most of the games I got rid of were selling for $1 or $2, maybe $5 a piece. And somebody would pay me $18 and walk away with 12 games. Those were very happy people, and I like making those people happy. And it also just clears some space for me to be able to start looking at new stuff and
you
have
brought
room
about,
for
I don't know, 4 bags of games somewhere around there. It was a mighty collection over there.
It was 4 or 5 full, those IKEA bags, the large blue ones. I had 2 full of, actually 3 of those full plus some extra, and I walked back with only 2 new games that I had bought in the auction.
Did you find all your buyers?
I did. I mean, you try and coordinate as best you can. You know, you
Right.
exchange phone numbers and you make plans. There were some people that I knew I wasn't going to connect with them until the last day, the Sunday. So I wasn't worried, but I did manage to track everybody down. And some people are very particular, like I will be in the lobby between 10 and 12 on Saturday, and others are like, I'll find you.
Mhm.
And it all works out. I think I've over the years of selling games, I think I had one no-show, like one person I could not connect with no matter how much I tried. And I think they left and they're like, oh, sorry. And it
Right.
was like a $3 game. And so I just sold it the next time.
Mhm. So pro tip, Eric knows this. So I ended up selling about 9 to 10 games, and I was very happy about that. Do not tell me that I am the white guy with a shirt that has this on it, because there's a lot of white guys at the convention. That's just the way. That's just reality, right? I'll be able to say like I'm the big Puerto Rican dude. So like, oh, okay, big Puerto Rican dude. that's easy to see. But especially do not tell me what's on your shirt, because what ends up happening is that I end up staring at everybody's shirt and everybody's cat.
That's true. You were very embarrassed about this.
I was, because I want to sell my game.
I hear you.
That was lunch money. I was hungry. So it's like, I knew I needed that cash to go get my taco. So it's like, I'm looking at all these people, I'm peering in, watching. Like, do you have that type of shirt? Please, if you are trying to link up, phone number is fine, or like a specific, more descriptive thing. I don't need to know what's on your shirt, because I'm sorry, that's whatever.
You need to wear a distinctive plume in your hat.
Something. Yes.
I'm wearing a boutonniere.
Absolutely. Okay. So but just to put it out to the peoples, that is a nice place to sell and to buy games. If you are somebody who is looking to round out your collection, someone like Eric, especially if someone like Eric, who's a reviewer, and I also sold some of my review copies, again, low bids, and here you go, $5 and everything like that. So that's a nice place to kind of get some good pickups. It really is. Okay, so let's talk about the actual games that we played at the table or taught or however it is. And so, was there a miss? Was there a game? Because that happens at cons too. Like you get there and you're excited, and the table experience for whatever reason is just, whoo, boy. So do you have one of those experiences?
You sort of mention it as being enthusiastic about the play. I don't think I was ever enthusiastic about it, but my kids drew me in, and their friends. My college buddy was there with his 2 kids, and they were very excited to play a game called Unstable Unicorns.
Okay.
Which is from the folks who made Exploding Kittens. It's that same design studio. I knew of this game, but I hadn't really ever tried to seek it out. But enthusiastic kids, you want to support their favorite games as well. And so I sat down and played around. I don't know if you've experienced this game, Jason.
I bought this game for my daughter and for us, the 2 of us, to play.
Okay.
I bought the kids version. So specifically the kids version, and it just womp womp. No, it wasn't her. Although my daughter has gotten to the point, because I've gotten many games. She's at this point tried 25 games. It is coconuts. That's what we play. If my daughter were to go to a con, we would take coconuts and we would play coconuts.
That is a good choice. I'll suggest that next time they do like a kids and families area. That would be a good one.
Adores that game. It's a wonder. It's if people don't know what coconuts is, a kids game. You have these little monkeys, and they're spring loaded so that you can put the little rubber coconut in their hands, and you toss them into a row of cups. That's all you're doing. It's just you're just like flicking the coconut into the cup. She loves it. She loves the magic spell. She loves to cover my eyes and like ruin my shot. And because my daughter, like, she doesn't. I wonder if she's gonna get into the kind of games that I'm gonna get into, because she doesn't do like reading cards, and like I've tried to kind of get into a little bit of that, like Marvel United, just like kind of fell super flat. A bunch of other stuff, but like the dexterity, Rampage, and coconut, that's the stuff that she gets into. So hopefully that translates at some point.
Well, Unstable Unicorns was a lot of take that, and it has a card called the Neigh card, like a horse, neigh. That is the cancel a card. It's any card. This type of card in the deck, and the goal is to get 7 unicorns in front of you, and most of the time you're playing them out, and you're playing cards that steal unicorns and take cards from opponents' hands and stuff. But there are these Neigh cards that basically negate the play of other cards. And the kids I was playing with knew which cards were the most dangerous. There were some that, like, if you have this in front of you, you are in position to win the game. Or if you have it in front of you, you will not win. There's one that reduces the size of your stable to 5. And so you can't win with 7 if you can only have 5 cards in front of you. And so they knew when to play those nay cards and when it wasn't as much of a big deal to do so. And so they, as soon as I put down a card that was going to help me, it just got nayed. And it just, at some point, I wasn't like, I was holding on to my nay for like a crucial moment, and I didn't get one of those moments that it was a really important card and I could have nayed it, and I didn't. There are some nay cards that can't be nayed themselves because you can nay a nay, and you know. I'm fine. I don't need to play it anymore. I understand that this fills a niche. I'm not saying that you're a bad person if you like this game. If you're enjoying it, that's great. This is not my style of game. So that would be my miss, is unstable unicorns.
Completely and utterly. It's not my cup of tea.
Yes.
So I was only there one day. So I played 5 games that day. Oh, it was glorious. I had 3 slots and then 2 games in between the slots, and all 5 games were good. And so I'll talk about them as we go on. I will say my one miss, and it ended up having being a good story, but I just wanted to kind of put it out there that, so my last game of the day, after a long day of gaming and I don't have my stamina yet. I signed up for Ark Nova, and I'd never played it. And the teach took about 45 minutes.
Whew.
And because the person was like trying to like, okay, this and then this and then this, and remember this, and so like I was sitting there and I was looking at the exits. I'm like, I can't do this. I'm a father of 2, 2 young children. My brain is melting. So a flag for people, the buffet effect. It's like, you get you put stuff on the buffet, make sure you can eat the whole meal. So thankfully there's a happier ending. I'll talk about it later, but just wanted to kind of give a flag for people that was not. I was feeling the pain at that point. Okay, so you taught a lot of games, you played many games. So give me your 4th. Number 4.
Number 4. It is a lovely light filler weight game of dice, and this is from Dr. Reiner Knizia. It's called Escape. Escape. It is a die rolling push your luck game. Every player has 2 dice, and they're special dice. One of them has a 7 pip side and one has a 6 pip side, and each of them has an X on one of their sides. And you start by rolling your dice, and you can continue rolling as long as you don't roll an X. If you roll an X on your first roll, no biggie. That's just a 0. So if I rolled a 2 and an X, that's a 20.
That's
you
good.
Put the highest number first. But if I can keep rolling and maybe I get a 4 and a 6, and now that's 64. That's not too bad. I might decide to stop. And so then I put those 2 dice as 64 on this little ladder with spaces for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. And so I place that there. And if those dice, so let's say I put it on the 3. If it gets back to my turn and my dice are still there, I go 3 spaces along the track. And the goal is to move 21 spaces. Great. But somebody else, if they have a higher number and they place below me on the track, they bump my dice off. So they will get their position to earn only 2 points, but they knocked my 3 points off. And so is this number going to last a turn? I don't think so. So I have to keep rolling. But if you roll an X, you bust and you move backwards on the track. If you roll doubles with double 1s, double 2s, or double 3s, you get 1, 2, or 3 spaces immediately. So there's always a possibility of a big surge and coming back. And if somebody rolls double X's on the first roll, that beats everything. You get to place it on the board and wipe every other pair of dice off the board and just be king of the hill for a while.
It feels like Evolved Can't Stop.
It's similar in feel, a little more interactive than Can't Stop. But I like them both. I think they're both excellent push your luck games, and Escape deserves a reprint. I'm hearing that there's like an Italian version coming on the horizon. So it'll be nice to see that available again. It's been out of print for a while, but I really had a big epic game where like 3 or 4 players were gunning for the lead and kept bumping each other off. Cause it's like, well, one person's in position. If it gets back around to them, they're going to win. So players with really strong rolls would place for 0 or only 1 point to knock off the one who was going to win when it got back to them. And it just was a lot of jockeying at the very end. And somebody won with a doubles just to take those extra 2 spaces to win the game. It was a blast. Really fun. Escape.
Nice. Escape. There you go. So my number 4 is the game that you taught. This was at 8:00 in the morning. I'd live about 25 minutes away from the area. So like getting up at 7:30 for a weekend was a sacrifice. But I was very excited to try Transformers, the card game. The Transformers, the deck building game. And so this is the one-stop co-op shop. So finally, we're going to go into a game that has cooperative elements to it. But I did not play the cooperative version. I played the team versus team version that is enabled by the expansion, which was taught by Eric. So we were 2 Autobots versus 2 Decepticons. It is a deck builder, but the twist here is that the deck it isn't like a standard market. It's what they call what they call a matrix. So the board, quote unquote, is cards, face down cards. And you're running around with your Autobot, and we play team versus team, and you're uncovering cards, and you have to do stuff in order to acquire the card. You either defeat it or buy it, with your resource or whatever it is. But that's kind of how you build your deck, is to acquire cards off of this central matrix. So that was, got it. And then we got into the interactions and the combats, and I'm not explaining them. I am not running that down on a spoken word podcast.
Sure.
But it was a little crunchy. I'll say that. And I think that's kind of the conclusion we came to the table. There were a lot of steps. So it's like, you got to reveal a card, then you got to check the bottom or the top of the card, and you have to check your resource, and you have a phase where everyone can assist, and then you're adding up numbers, and then there's a phase we can bring back in your own powers. You could spend energy on in order to kind of adjust. There was a lot of the game, we were flowing along, acquiring our cards, interacting, doing the things, and then a combat would occur, which is when you encounter your opposite faction in a card generally, and then play would just
yeah.
And we would be like, okay, I was sure. So I liked the game. I did like the game, and I'd be curious to see how it played cooperatively, because that's my jam, is the cooperative versions of it. But that was a little bit much for me.
Well, I think part of what slows it down is that you can, if you're the Decepticon players and the Autobots are trying to take down a Decepticon boss, the Decepticons can defend that Decepticon boss by playing cards on their turn. And that element does add a good amount of slowdown to the whole process. And if you're playing cooperatively, that isn't part of it. All you're doing is trying to survive 3 of the opposing team's bosses before you run out of time, or somebody gets too damaged to continue. Whereas with the team versus team, you're trying to collect points, and you have to basically make your way all the way to the end of the game and count up points at the end. So I agree with you. I think that's it slows down a little bit in team versus team.
I did like it. I am curious to try the different modes and everything. I know it's built as a competitive game, which the competitive doesn't really interest me that much in terms of racing for cards and such. But I can definitely give it a little asterisk. I did put recommend. So that's Transformers, the deck building game. My number 4. All right, Eric. Tell me about your number 3 game at FalCon.
So it's funny you mentioned Transformers as your number 4, because my number 3 is another one of the Hasbro deck building games from Renegade. This is the G.I. Joe deck building game.
So they have G.I. Joe, Transformers, Power Rangers, and My Little Pony.
They do.
And is that all of them? All of them are there
at
more?
This point? As far as I know, those are the 4.
Okay.
And I have now played all of them, and I have varying opinions. They're all very different games. This is a misconception. Some people think that they're all just reskins of the same system, sort of like the Cryptozoic Cerberus system. Right. That's not the case. These are 4 quite different games.
Or Love Letter, where it's Thanos Love Letter and Batman. Right. There's a different 0 card for each of the love letters, but no, they're pretty much the same game.
Not true here. So the different Hasbro deck builders are very different, and the G.I. Joe deck building game is strictly a cooperative experience. You are playing as the Joes, and you are trying to take down Cobra's evil plot. It's actually a plot. There's a series of plot cards. There's 3 acts to the adventure. There's some random encounters that you have to deal with, but then there's some act break important cards that you always have to do when you're playing that particular sequence. You're building your deck like many deck builders, but whenever you purchase a card, it goes on the top of your deck, so you're immediately getting that next card on your next play. So you can do some immediate tactical plays, like I know I'm going to need a card for our next encounter. I'm going to put it in my deck right now. And then there's this concept of missions that you go on to try and take down Cobra's plots. And you're going to have to use vehicles. There's vehicles you start with one basic one, but you can draft new ones that go in your hangar that anybody can use. And that can hold a certain number of Joe characters. And so I can contribute 2 Joes to this mission, but we can go around the table and everybody else can contribute Joes to the mission. It feels very collaborative. And then you're going to roll dice based on what the expertise of the Joes and what the mission is doing. There's hidden complications that come into play. There's suddenly, you get a card that says put Destro into play, and you have to search through the deck and find Destro, and now he's a problem you have to deal with. Destro's a jerk too. We don't like it. Actually, who really got us was Major Blood, who's a character who just constantly was locking down a bunch of our cards, and he came back. We took him out twice, and he came back a third time. He just couldn't kill him. And we were doing great. I think we were managing really well in the first 2 acts, but the third act, we just got slammed. But I feel like the mark of a good cooperative game is that it still sort of haunts you when you're done. Like, what could we have done differently? And it wasn't like we had no chance. There was nothing we could have done. And I never want to play that again. That's not the case with G.I. Joe. It's like, well, maybe if we had focused more on Major Blood the third time he showed up, or if we had taken out the Baroness when she first showed up instead of waiting a couple of turns, it's really kind of cool how it all comes together. And I think a really rewarding experience when you manage to work together to solve the problem. So now we know. And knowing's happening.
G.I. Joe.
The G.I. Joe deck building game. I'm really enjoying it and want to play it some more.
A real American hero. G.I. Joe is there. Anybody under 35 is not going to know.
It's true.
I went on Jesse Quackalope's his YouTube channel. I helped them preview Masters of the Universe, the game of Simon.
Okay.
And they did not know the original song. So, of course, I had to go do a whole rendition.
He-Man.
They know all the remixes and the Michael Bay. Nah, come on, man. You got to go back.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, so, and I'm actually really, like, it's unfortunate that they came out so close together, because that adds to the impression that they're like the same game. What you described is not what I described.
No, they're quite different. And I do think that as a cooperative experience, I like G.I. Joe better than Transformers.
Which
but
is a shame,
the theme, I always
liked
liked Transformers better.
Yeah, I like Transformers better. I'm sad about that, but it is what it is. All right, so my number 3. Speaking of a game that is haunted. Actually, I was haunted by this game. It is a game I've not played in about 3 years. Wingspan. So Wingspan was not my first choice for games that I was going to play. You've played it, like I played it when it was hot and I reviewed it and all this stuff. It's like, okay. And then, so I let it drop off, but then it's like, okay, I know this game. I know I'm not going to need a whole rules teach. Let me get back into Wingspan. And there was in the context of because people ask about it. They still ask about it to this day. They talk about it online and they like, what's the hype? Or like, I played Wingspan and it's not that good. It doesn't live up to the hype. And like, so there's the hype and then the backlash and the backlash and the backlash. So like Wingspan is involved in that conversation. Is it as good as people say or whatever it is? And is it worth, all those awards that it got and whatever? And it was nice to be able to kind of get past all that, sit back down after a couple of years and play it again. The game is good.
It's a solid game.
It's just a good game.
Yeah.
It's like a really good game. I wouldn't say like, obviously it's not great. Like I'm a Race for the Galaxy fan. I think Race for the Galaxy for what it does is better. Like in terms of that engine building, card based. I just think Race is like, there's a lot more pop for me, but the satisfaction of building a little engine and then you have that last round and you press the button in your engine. And you generate all those eggs and you draw cards and, you have tuck your card, you get this and use this to get this. Like setting that up is cool. And to your point, like looking back and being like, oh, if I'd have done that instead of this, if I had, put this bird in and not, wasted time on that bird. I ended up with like a whole bunch of extra food. It's like, I didn't need all that food.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could, that food's a tiebreaker. What do you need food? That's nothing. I could have done something else and not filled that up and not press that button too often. And so I went back and I have the iOS app. So I'm like, I'm going to be banging a couple of iOS games of this. And I'm like, wow, this game is really good. It's back in my rotation. So articulating about the hype and all the discussion about it, getting down, distilling it to its basic essence. Wingspan is a freaking good game. And Wingspan Asia is coming out, the 1 to 2 player version.
Yes.
So like a little dueling version is coming out soon. So we are getting more and more Wingspan. So I'm back in.
Excellent. I've been playing on Board Game Arena. It recently hit that platform as well. And I think I've been playing a lot more than I ever played in person.
Right.
I think I've owned the game for some time, and I don't think I've actually played my physical copy. I've always played somebody else's. But it's one that I'm sure my wife would enjoy it. It's a blast. It's a well-crafted game for sure.
Right. So Wingspan is my number 3. So number two is
I guess it's not that old. When did Return to Dark Tower come out? I think it finally released last year.
Mm-hmm.
It feels somewhat new because there's a new Kickstarter for the next expansion coming out. But Return to Dark Tower is the resurgence of the classic 80s game from Restoration Games.
Had you played the 80s version?
Only once. My cousin had it. I was too young for it in its initial release, but my older cousin had it. I always looked up to him, and one day we finally convinced him, can we please play Dark Tower? I would always see it in his closet. I'm like, can we play it? No, you're too young. Can we play it? No, you're too young. And one night he said, fine, we're going to play it. And I remember it being really complicated, and it had this huge warring tower, and it was super cool. The new version is also super cool. The tower is unbelievably impressive. It lights up, it makes sounds, it glows, it rotates. You drop skulls into the tower to end your turn. And it all uses this app. It's also another cooperative game. And it really feels like an epic adventure. You're making your characters stronger. You're dealing with the threats. It has a sort of pandemic-y aspect of, there's corruption attacking the land. There's bad guys. You have to deal with the immediate threats, but there's also an overarching goal you're trying to complete. And so you have to really split your resources and your forces, and who is best able to handle this crisis? Who is best able to go secure this assistant that will really help us, but we have to get there before the end of the month, which is going to happen somewhere between 7 and 9 turns into the month. I love the way the combat works. It feels like the Price is Right game Punch a Bunch, where you get this array of cards and you just select them on the app. Pick 3 cards. Okay, I'm going to pick this one, and then this one, and then this one, and then they get revealed. And you have to deal with the consequences and spend your advantages to try and reduce those consequences. I love the combat system in this game. It all just comes together in such an exciting package. And I taught this one. It was an early morning slot, and the teams. I could see the team working together most of the time, but ultimately, when one player would go off and do their own thing and wasn't necessarily considering the good of the many, and got themselves into a hole, entered a fight that they just weren't ready for, and got a little bit too much corruption, and then some huge event happened and they had to take too much more corruption, and that wiped them all out. But it's such an epic experience. I need to play this more often. And it was nice to be able to bring the set out. I have the play mat, so I got to set up the play mat and play with the minis, and really have some tremendous table presence for Return to Dark Tower.
Return to Dark Tower. I played it once. I want to play it more. It is because I remember the original version, and I played a lot of those. Like I played Atmosphere, Nightmare. The game where you kind of go around the board. You had a VHS tape with the ghoul.
Yes,
or whatever that dude was called.
The Crypt Keeper. No, not the Crypt Keeper. The Crypt Keeper is the guy in HBO.
I think it was the Gatekeeper.
The Gatekeeper is right.
Something like that. And Into the Hole. I remember that. And I just remember that nostalgia, right? And so not that I want to go back there. Like the original Dark Tower game was not a great game, but it was cool for its time and it was a good experience. And so having this new version where they manage to take the soul of it, which I guess is Restoration's deal, right? They
Sure.
find the soul of the old game
Yeah.
and they give it the new shine. Oh my god, like you saying before, it does feel like a kind of a big honky adventure. The tower is useful because it is the thing you need to distribute the skulls, and it is basically an electronic cube tower.
Yeah.
Right, and that's really what it is. But so did you need a big expensive spinning contraption in order to just like plunk some skulls in there and for it to flow out? The answer is yes.
Yes. Well, it's more than just a cube tower too. I mean, not only does it do that, but it also reveals glyphs. There's
Mm,
penalties if certain things are facing you. It's much more than just a distribution mechanism.
right.
It randomizes lots of other stuff too.
And you hear, like, we get it every time in the One Stop Co-op Shop, the comments, like we will feature a game like this, and every time it'll be like, it's an app, not doing it, or whatever it is. And it's like, it's honestly people who have that loss aversion. They fear that their hobby's going to change and that all games are going to be like this, and we're losing something. It's like there's like I can see that fear kind of happening maybe 5-6 years ago when like, we're going to explore apps. But I think we settled in, like, there's only going to be a couple of releases a year that get an app, and
Right.
they're going to be dope. I don't understand like the continued years long aversion.
Well, it's back when, a few years ago when the first legacy games showed up and there was just as much grumbling. Oh, great. So all of our games are going to be these legacy games that are all
Right.
consumables and that they're all going to be like that. And I don't want that part of my hobby. But how many legacy games do we really have?
Not
They're
many.
one, difficult to design,
Right.
and two, there aren't that many. There's plenty of other traditional games out there that are
Right.
non-legacy games. It's fine. You're fine.
Right. And a lot of legacy games ended up with removable stickers.
Yeah,
So
it's true.
that's where the push came from. So it's like the pandemic games. Have you played all three of them? Have you gone through the
I
different
am
ones?
just starting season 0. I'm trying to get my family said yes, we want to play more, and then we have not played more.
Completely. We banged it out. Well, it came out right as the pandemic hit, so we had to delay a year. But as soon as the vaccine came out, like the vaccine was like, okay, vaccine, boom, pandemic 0.
Yep.
And so that was the only one where the stickers like mattered to the story, and it was a truly disposable game. Like you couldn't pass it on to somebody else. And I really felt like that's, to me, that's the height of legacy, is like that expanded, more immersive, more attractive story. I think other legacy games, they kept the stickers, but it didn't really integrate that sense of heightened story. It's like, okay, I have a cooler character, or I have this toy that I played with. And
Yeah.
so all that, to your point, like, okay, all the the catastrophizing about like, where is our hobby going, with apps and with legacy and all these, no.
Yeah.
The gravity of the hobby is still like it's still the whatever it is, like $20, $30, $40 game. And I'm gonna get to one right at the end. But so actually, okay, so let me talk about the big honking game. Speaking
Okay.
of like trends in the hobby, right? So my number 2 is Ark Nova. So I survived that teach.
Good.
Uh, so I mean, we've reviewed Ark Nova here on the channel. We have some playthroughs on our channel for like different solo modes and everything. If you don't know what it is, it's a giant honking. Oh my god, I can't even it's a mishmash of mechanism, giant Euro game. But at the end of the day, it's a card game. So you have a giant deck of 200 some odd zoo cards, and through Euro things, you're building your zoo.
Through Euro things.
Euro things.
Yada, yada, yada. You have a zoo.
You have a board that has like the polyominoes. You got to fit it together in a zoo. You got your workers, and you're placing your workers, and you have your card drafting. You have all these things, but you're building a zoo. And what I appreciated, and I think like if it wasn't this way, I probably would have begged out because I was really hurting. But I had played Terraforming Mars before. I could see, having played Terraforming Mars, it's not the same game, but like looking what to look for, how to coordinate tags, and putting together the tags, and having that like goal at the very beginning really helped me. It's like, okay, go for Africa and go for Australia, and you have a card full of Australia, play your Australia. And the way that game, and I don't think enough Euro games do this, and I really appreciate that Ark Nova did this, the entry point felt a lot more like low barrier. Once I got through everything and I grokked everything, I actually ended up winning. I actually ended up doing really well. It was a bunch of new players, so it was like kind of low. I probably would have got smoked by experienced player, but it was nice to be able to like understand what was going on. I was like, this big old complicated, you're gonna take 40 minutes to teach, managed to come together in a way that made sense. Okay, I'm it. I'm cool. I guess my in terms of trends in the hobby, like it just feels like the new hotness games are just like pushing up that level of complexity. So like we have the your Terraforming Mars was like a complex game, and then you push it up a little bit, then we get to Ark Nova, which is a more complex game than Terraforming Mars. So I mean, obviously we're looking, if you're looking at different ends of the hobby, it's different. But in terms of the games that are like the BGG crowd is talking about, the Facebook crowd is, the real like gamers, it feels like that complexity window is getting pushed up and up and up. And so I don't know where that's gonna go. But that's my one kind of like regret. It's like, oh man, I wish I could have had that experience in a little bit of a lower barrier gate of entry, but I did enjoy it. I did enjoy Ark Nova. I do want to play it more.
Sure. I mean, speaking of to the trends, I think we see some market correction. The really buzzed about games also include ones that are far simpler.
Right.
And you'll often hear when, the really hot buzzed about games tend to be more complex, then you'll start to hear people saying, what I really want is something that's not going to take me 3 hours to play. And I really want something that's only going to be an hour, hour and a half. And then they start gravitating towards some simpler Splendor style games that are quicker.
My number one. We'll get to that.
So that, I think we'll see if you're getting that sense that things are pushing into the more complex, longer games, heading into the Vital Lacerda category, there's also going to be a force that's pushing the other direction and heading into Cascadia, or something that's a little easier to enter.
Okay, so that was my number two. Your number one favorite experience of the con.
Number one is going to
better not have been Transformers. That would have.
It's not Transformers. This will come to no surprise that anyone who's heard me speak about board games ever in the last 10 years or so. So one great thing about conventions is that sometimes someone will put together an epic version of a game that they've built, or they've put together multiple copies of something, and they're doing a version of the game that could only be done at a convention. And my friend Keith Corbino built his own copy of Merchant of Venus. This is the 1980s pick up and deliver in space, my number one game of all time.
Still? To this day? Okay.
To this day, it's my number one game. And he built out of foam core and plaster of Paris and styrofoam balls, made a giant fabric, made this giant 2 table spanning Merchant of Venus board. It sort of felt like a war room map, like we should have had the little croupier sticks to push our pieces around. It felt like that. And so not only did we get to play with these epic components, he had like space shuttle models that were our various ships. They were, for those of you who were able to watch the video, like the ship was this big.
Eric is holding his hands in the size of a human head.
Like the size of a grapefruit. And so not only did we get to play with this epic edition of the game, which was fantastic, but also I got to play with people who almost to a player knew how to play the game.
Ooh.
And so I think I did a little bit of reviewing for a couple of the players who hadn't played in a while, but most of us were like, yeah, we know what we're doing. Let's do this. And usually I'm teaching to new players every time I play this game. So to get to play with some more experienced folks on this giant epic version that felt like we're standing over a galactic war room and play a game of Merchant of Venus, it was an epic experience, and I was delighted to get to play it. Always a blast.
I'm so happy for you. Because I remember listening to the Dice Tower podcast. I think I got into board games around 2012, 13, 14, somewhere around there. And the gate, Ray, right? I think you had joined the Dice Tower podcast at that point, or somewhere around there.
2009 was when I joined as a co-host.
So there would always be rankings every single year of like favorite games and stuff. And I remember at that point hearing you say Merchants of Venus my number one. Then Tom would give you guff, and you'd be like, "Nope, too bad."
Yep.
And here we are, 2022. The clocks never die. Pandemic over here is my favorite game. I don't know if that will change. I would love to play I was actually gonna not satisfied with like the 10th anniversary one because it was like the metal and it was nice. I would love to play like a big version, right? A
Yep.
multi-table, like, let's go ahead and go to Calcutta. That I would love that.
I think I've seen Gen Con had a floor model of Pandemic. They played in a hallway
Oh,
and they had people
outstanding.
walking around, so you had to be standing where your character was and walk around to the different spots. I didn't stay to watch too much of it, but there was a floor spanning game of Pandemic going on.
Outstanding. I would love that. As long as, to your point, as long as people know how to play and we're able
Yeah.
to kind of get through stuff, and I'm not just like standing there and it's okay. No, that'd be amazing. So I'm very happy for you. That number one, Merchants of Venus. That's great. So you mentioned my number one. Actually, I was like, oh my god, he's reading my mind. Cascadia.
All right.
So speaking of, so like, oh my God, Cascadia is above Ark Nova. I guess that speaks to what I'm looking for in gaming nowadays. So I went through my phase where you see I have Arnak and Dune and all these games. Like I enjoy them, and I guess a couple of years ago I probably would have been an Ark Nova, but for now I'm in a different phase of my gaming life. I want to be able to just get something to the table and let it run smooth as silk and have nice, simple decision spaces. And like I hadn't played it in about a year or whatever, it did a couple of months, but it took 20 seconds to pick the rules back up, but to dive in and get that rich decision space
Yeah.
to have the different cards looking at, okay, what do I want to go for first? Ooh, there's a couple of elk out there. I'm going to go ahead and make the circle with the elk. And I see that other people are going for their foxes or they're going for their bears, and whatever people decide to go for, you react to it. And it's a lot. Cascadia gave me, and I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn or be overstating or anything, but I being in the solo co-op space, it's either giant honking adventure games, like War Turn to Dark Tower would be a good example, like the
Yep.
Kickstarters, the CMONs, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's either that or like the big solo Euro. So the Ark Nova is a big solo Euro, and the Lacerda games and the Uwe games, and like the big honking ones. And to have a game like Cascadia, which does have a solo mode, which is funny to play the multiplayer game after you're used to the solo. It's like, oh, that doesn't work like that.
Yep.
But it just, and it's like what, a $30 game, and it's beautiful, and it's the decision tree is rich. I could play the game forever. And I was one of those games that I played like in between, so my game had wrapped up and I met up with a couple of people, and one of the persons I sold the game to, and we're looking at the checkout, like, what do we want to play? Ooh, Cascadia. Bam. Oh, yeah. I love Cascadia. So it just gives me a lot of hope that I really would love designers to like, okay, that's that,
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
Do that. That is awesome. So that
getting a rewarding experience into, say, a 60 to 90 minute playtime is really a nice place to be.
And without like a lot, so some people like to explode their brains. Like easy decisions, easy but rich decisions. There's no friction in that game at all for me. I'm never confused about a rule. I'm never confused about like, oh, well, this is a miss thing, and there's no friction. I dive right in to Cascadia.
I think Flamecraft might be one that hits that for you. It's about that playtime. I brought it with me to FalCon, but it didn't actually hit the table. It's like the one thing I brought that we did not play physically there, but I've played it a few times before FalCon, and it's a lovely game, well produced, and it has that sort of good momentum. It's done in about 60 to 90 minutes, and has that rewarding decision space when you're all done with it. So it might be one worth looking at if that's your current.
I requested it from Lucky Duck Games. They sent out their little email. They say, "Oh, do you want to review Flamecraft?" I'm like, "Yes, I want to review Flamecraft." And I didn't. Come on.
I wasn't willing to wait. I paid for it.
But yeah, so that was the games that we enjoyed at the convention. That is a convention that it runs every single year. It runs twice a year. So like
twice a year, we should have a con in March. So that's something to look forward to.
Are you tied into the organizers? And like,
I know the gentleman who runs the board game side of things, named Mark. I have known him for many years. He was in my gaming group before I knew him as the ConCon guy.
mm.
So I've had a relationship with him for a while.
And like, so because I know that the venue had to change, because
Yes.
it's now, COVID changed a lot of things. So like, now it's not a hotel anymore. Now it's like some sort of condo thing. So that's all like, so we're looking to get back that plug back in. ConCon, FalCon is like, we'll first steam ahead.
I think that's the plan. Is although there's growing pains when you're dealing with a new space. I mean, we had like a really great relationship with a hotel in Stamford, Connecticut, and they knew all their people, and they just it ran like clockwork. And now having to change to a different city, now in Waterbury, and a different hotel with different venue and event coordinators, and just sort of learning the ropes again. There are certainly things to work on for the next time they run it, but they learn stuff, and they're looking forward to improving, and we'll see if it's even in the same venue for the next go around. But it's back, which is really the most important thing.
Local conventions recommend to sell games and buy games, recommend to play games, recommend if you want to get involved in some of the leadership and or even if it's just like presenting stuff, or if you want to try to get more into the logistical side of things. Local cons recommend. Not everybody can go to Essen, people.
Yes, and it's a great way to you see some people who would never even dream of going to the major conventions. It's just, I want to do my local stuff, and and some people who haven't even heard of some of the games that have been out for a year or two,
right,
are happy to learn them in these situations. It's a great way to spread the love of the hobby, is at the local cons.
And so where can the people find you?
You'll find me on the Dice Tower channel. My current show with Mr. Tom Vassell is called At the Table with Tom and Eric. Jason, you were kind enough to join us as a guest on one of those episodes.
That was fantastic. I love that.
That's a combo YouTube show and a podcast floating around. And I also do it's a series of short video reviews called Summerer Time. My next one that I'm working on right now is on clue-giving games that use words as clues. I did one with visual clues not too long ago. And if you want to just hear me talk to you and want to pay to hear me talk a lot, I'm on Audible. Search me up as Eric Michael Summerer. I've got over 350 audiobooks out there. And so some genre should be of interest if you want to buy one of my books.
Eric Michael Summerer, it was a pleasure to talk to you.
Very nice. It was a joy. Great to see you at FalCon, and always great to talk to you, Jason.
If you can change your mind, you can change the world, people. So until next time, later, everybody.